Okay, so we are continuing our conversation on socialization. Essentially, we're going to dive right into it. I'm going to share the slides right now. And essentially, what we're going to be looking at in regards to this are the agents of socialization. That word will feel a little foreign to you right now because we're just learning it. But essentially this, there are things called agents of socialization. Think about it like agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? The people who are all part of the organization. If you're a nerd like me and love Marvel, that might connect. I don't know, might not. But essentially interactions with people, groups, and institutions that teach us about our material and non-material culture. See, I told you it's going to keep coming back. The norms, values, beliefs, and symbols and languages that are shared to us. We've been talking about this, thinking about this from the paradigms we've covered. You think about the structural functionalist dynamic of it, right? Like, how does it function to better society? The conflict theory. Okay, well, how do people and groups that we're surrounded with impact our social equity? Are we given a lot? Are we given a little? Or is it taken from us? What does it represent towards us? And what are the symbols inside symbolic interactionalism that provide power? How do we know that we have nice things? Do we have a watch? Do we have a nice car? How do we know wealth? How do we know categories? How do we know what is or what isn't material culture to us, right? These are the dynamics of how we also develop self. Where am I in the world? I mean, think about this. Think about when you were entering school at first. I doubt you really knew if you were poor or rich when you first got to school. Sometimes you may have. But the reality is that many times children and other people around you will let you know where you fall on the social hierarchy, right? If you have tattered clothes or something, maybe someone makes fun of it. It's the first time you've ever realized that you might have not super nice clothes, right? Those are symbols that represent where we stay. These are through socialization, or agents of socialization, that we learn our place in society. Now, this can be through interactions with friends, family, strangers. These all develop our self-identity, right? Parents will play roles in the process of socialization of teaching us right from wrong, as I said before. Peers, our friends, will teach us what's cool, what's not. Am I being chuggy? Am I part of the vibe? Like, what is it, right? Like, they'll help us find and establish our understandings of group dynamics and how we act in a group. This develops ourselves into a type of picture of what we want to be in the world around us and how we play into that world. Remember, Emile Durkheim, one of the founders of sociology, started and stated that sociological understanding is based around the construction that society is greater than the sum of its parts. So peers provide insight into the understanding of others, what is seen as norms outside of the family, the ability to start seeing the world. We looked at this when we looked at Mead's idea of how we develop and how we look at things from the generalized to the significant other. Family is the first agents of socialization, bring our attention to sorts of value sets and of our material and non-material culture. How you were raised routinely builds upon how you understand things. Right versus wrong might be different based upon what area, what location you grew up, what culture you grew up within. These play a part in socializing our experience. Friends help us to expand this and become a more sense of what is differently norm. It's not everything that we understand. It's another person's perspective, which helps build upon our understanding. It's also how we gain outside perspective, right? Many of you have lived in very inclusive neighborhoods, whether you think you have or not. You tend to be surrounded by the same socioeconomic people of the same position as you. So this ability to be able to perceive and understand ourselves in the grand picture is much larger. This is where secondary agents of socialization, friends and people you meet along the way, play into the greater development of ourself. Strangers, aka the people you're not connected to, help us gain that full knowledge, right? Because you're very limited. Maybe many of your implicit biases might be established by your parents, whether you want to admit it or not, because we are only understanding that which we have been around. Think about dogs who bark at strangers. Many times there's been rumors that dogs are racist, which is not true, because if they aren't around something and something is foreign to them, or doesn't look like something they're used to, or a smell they don't know, they feel fight or flight, right? This is still similar to humans. If you grew up in a very homogenous neighborhood, everyone looks and is the same like you, everyone has the same economic status as you, you'll find yourself not knowing how to interact. Think about this prototypical stereotype of white people when they get to a party trying to act cool because we don't know how to interact with anyone who doesn't look like ourselves, right? I know this story. When I went to parties, trying to pretend like the media taught me how to act made me look kind of insensitive and rude because I had a lack of understanding before I started becoming more diversely connected with people of different walks of life. So it's important that we understand fully more than just our family expectations. So pulling back to family, there are primary agents of socialization. They're the ones who get us in the beginning and they teach us throughout our entire life, right? This ties to Freud, Erikson, Kohler, Cooley, and Mead, and Piaget, right? They're the first agents. They teach us how we understand the world. Primary groups establish and build the foundation. So if you think about architecture, for any of you in that field, they're the building around it, right? The building is there. It's the material culture, but we have to repurpose the insides and change over time to maintain up with the times, right? So parents and guardians teach you all the small and big things, riding a bike, table manners, birds and the bees, political views, many times passed down. And there's a theorist in sociology named Pierre Bourdieu who talks about the idea of cultural capital. Now, this is things that you may or may not have experienced, right? If your parents took you to operas and you were very cultured growing up, you may have a certain benefit, right? You may look more bourgeoisie if you understand the types of forks you're supposed to use at a nice restaurant, right? This idea of understanding cultural capital is huge, right? Like if you've been in all these different circumstances, you've been to plays, you've been to operas, you've gone to all these fancy events, you can use that as prestige, pride, right? The non-financial assets that help you succeed in the world. If you have connections to somebody very high up because of a family friend, this is cultural capital. It's something you can turn in for a value. Think about how much books have established. If you're somebody who has a super connection to books, it might be because your parents read to you. That might be something that holds extreme significance to you because it taught you the value of education, or at least has some nostalgic memory. Think about books like The Giving Tree. Other than lifelong trauma that it's caused me, it taught me the impact and viewpoints when I'm growing up of being generous and giving, and not giving too much that we extend ourselves to the point of death. Seriously, The Giving Tree, trauma. But these are very important. So what are our peer groups then? Well, there are secondary socialization methods. They're not the primary. And as we grow older, we venture forward and make new friends, new connections, diverse connections, right? When you go to college, many of you might be the first time you're hanging out with people of all walks of life, and they help build your understanding. This is seen as your peer group. Open more avenues in the worlds of socialization. The reality is this: peer groups help with social diffusion. Social diffusion helps you get opportunities. We're going to talk a lot about this in class, but your secondary group or your peer group is going to be where you're going to find more opportunity for jobs. Because if you're hanging around with the homogenous networks you grew up with, what ends up happening is you're never going to get out of that stratification, that socioeconomic status. Because how? If everyone makes the same and looks the same as you, how are you going to move forward? It's not possible. Friends of different socioeconomic, political, racial, and gender experiences help to expand our understanding of the world, but they also help you network. So peer groups can allow for this social diffusion, this diffusion of social assets, cultural capital to occur, as well as appropriating the cultural norms foreign to your primary group. So maybe your parents are really bigoted, right? Well, maybe making friends will change that, right? Your experience in the world will help you be able to find the norms that establish a better sense of self and expand on the diversification of who you are. So there's many types of socialization. There's gender socialization, learning the psychological and social traits that are supposed to be associated with one's gender. We're in a renaissance of looking into gender norms, right? But many times it starts at birth. I mean, really think about this. And a great conversation for Yellow Dig. Were you and your brother raised the same, if you have a brother? Was he expected to do the chores you were expected to do? Or how about your room? Was it pink or was it blue, right? This starts being assumed gender norms. Many times, we talked about Kohlberg's study, women were taught to be more maturing, more nesting, more caring, more comforting. Men were taught to be emotionless and taught to be like, go do sports, be a man, right? Boys will be boys. Biases and norms and values ascribed to you or taught to you aren't chosen, they're taught to you. At birth can help dictate your personality and path in the world based on things that you don't even have control on because they've been socialized to you. Be a man, don't be a wimp. Right? This idea that men have assumed gender role, it makes us be very strong. Boys don't cry. Don't be a wimp. Stop being such a girl. Be a man. These things are taught at a young age to men. And many times that's not very ladylike. Why don't you smile more? If you just, you would look, if you had a pretty face, maybe you could find a husband. These terrible things put out there of socialization dynamics connected to gender. Race socialization, the learning process by which children learn behaviors, values, attitudes associated with racial groups. You look at this with right now, we're seeing so much of this recently with the racial discriminations is partly learned through the values taught by parents. The sins of the father and the mother don't fall too far away from the tree, right? Diffusion of racial and ethnicities provides context and helps to normalize the social interactions from people of different ethnic backgrounds. You are taught norms and values of your family unit. Also, growing up as a certain race in this country, you're taught different value structures, right? People of color, especially those of African Americans and Black, right, are taught different interactions with police because of the racial biases, right? Like white people don't understand a lot of the privilege we have, that being pulled over by a cop is an annoyance, not a danger. And these are things that are socialized to us. You have to teach your children how they're going to be able to experience life once they leave the nest or leave your home, because there are things that are partially and unfortunately true about every situation that we're within that lead us towards understanding our expectations of reality. And then class socialization, the learning process through which children learn norms, behaviors, and taught values. This is I talked about before, right? If you're going to go to an Ivy League college, many times that's predetermined, it's ascribed. Someone's already gotten you in the path, right? But many people aren't in that socioeconomic benefiting group. So you learn your place in class. Like I said earlier, with people telling you that your clothes are ragged, you're unlikely in your environment that you grow up in it because it's homogenous, going to have any idea that you're poor, because everyone around you is. Reference groups, we'll talk about that shortly. But this idea, the expectations of one limitations is often set by class. You've been brought up either by birth or association. Your expectations in a low-income socioeconomic family isn't to go to Ivy League or maybe even college itself, whereas someone whose parents were college graduates or even Ivy League graduates are going to follow in that same path. It's an ascribed socialization. You don't have a choice. And this is very much done on a regular basis. You're taught what your limits are. You know, as you get older, what is and what isn't a realistic expectation because you've been socialized of what your class status is. You know the expectation, especially those of color, what interactions you may have in social engagements, right? Arguments behind passing, behind police interactions, discrimination. And then gender socialization is very huge too. Many times there's expectations sexistly based upon how women and men are supposed to act in the workforce and in the world in general. So the socialization through family and through friends helps build these and helps also you understand where you stand in the world, whether you like it or you don't. These will teach you where you're at. So gender socialization, as we're talking about, learning the psychological and social traits associated with gender. This starts at birth. Think about the color of your room. Biases and norms are established. That's not very ladylike, right? Don't be a man. These things are pushed on a regular basis so that we have an understanding of what's expected from the day we enter this world. Norms, values, and ascribed statuses that taught us how we are and aren't supposed to act, right? Take up little space is a common one that many women are facilitated with, right? Don't be, whereas men are freaking manspreading to the point where it's ridiculous because there are unfair biases and advantages that are there. Essentially, you're looking at how we socialize subconsciously through informal and formal sanctions, the behavior of expectations. And yes, we're going through a renaissance of people really exploring this gender dynamic, but there's much more work needed. Anticipatory socialization. This is a big one. Make sure you're paying attention. I know that you can kind of zone in, zone out of these lectures, but gender, race, and class are all examples of what this type of socialization has, right? What are you anticipated to achieve? The process of if you're going to make it or not comes with privilege, also comes with expectations, right? This is the social process where people learn to take on the values and standards of groups they plan to join. If you want to be a doctor, then you're going to spend all this time reading medical journals and doing everything you can to be a doctor, right? Children learn the roles there through primary groups and ascribed roles given to them and taught to them through socialization. Often men are taught, as I mentioned, and treated to be one way and women are held to be another way. So that anticipatory socialization of when you go somewhere, you might have an expectation of how you're going to engage. One of the dynamics of white privilege is that many people, if they're not aware of it, when they go to job interviews, are not expecting to have someone interview them of color. They're expecting the reality that someone's going to look like them. That's the white privilege there, right? This idea of the anticipatory socialization of being able to make it, the battle between the minority and the majority groups, right? Social stratification, class trajectory also play into this type of socialization. If you're wealthy, it's a total different expectation of where you're supposed to go. You may not have any limitations, but you also have expectations. Some of you in this room or in your room watching this in my classes are probably from a very wealthy family, and there is pressure to live up to the great person that your family was, right? But at the same time, that same type of stress goes on those from low income families where no one holds any expectations for them, thus no one really pushes them. And that's written self-fulfilling prophecy. If someone tells you you're never going to get past being poor and then you just never do, maybe you manifested that. And that's the hardship that there is. First generation college student legacy, right? You're in there trying to make a difference, but you don't have anyone there to tell you how it works. My parents once said to me in recent years, when they've outlived their parents, how long it was when they died, that they're finally at a stage where they don't have any type of point of reference. They can't call their parents because they passed away, obviously, and they don't have any model of how they're supposed to act. They're finally in a position where they're having to figure it out. So what do your friends, family, and parents expect from you? These are things you know because you've been socialized and you know what the expectations are. You know how you're supposed to act. You bring a significant other, you know what you want them to say or what would get them in trouble. We know what is expected because we're anticipating it. That's why the name anticipatory socialization. It's just in the name. Secondary socialization, we've been talking about this process of which you learn socialization outside the home, social institutions, college, universities, high school, all that, video game culture, all these places teach you secondary socialization. Your friends can teach you different perspectives. These perspectives open and engage with you to gaining a different sense of diversifying your understanding of the world. Institutions are a major part of socialization, or secondary agents of it, or the agents of socialization. So essentially schools teach with a hidden curriculum. Believe me, it really is. It's not something that is nefarious or dubious and planned to indoctrinate the students, but essentially we're teaching you life goals in these institutions of, middle school, elementary school, high school, college, right? Schools will provide you with basic knowledge. Raise your hand to be answered, turning in your assignment on time. We're teaching you to wait your turn to talk and then talk when you're supposed to. Make sure you hand things on time. Raise your hand teaches you to understand the role in the classroom and the role in life. Turning your assignment teaches you self-governing, right? Spelling bee can also be a game. It teaches you that games can also be fruitful, right? If you're really good at spelling, you've now passed the idea that you can, one, do what's assigned to you, two, learn how to be a better speller. teaches you also the idea of competition, which allows you to understand how to win gracefully or how people who win get more. So it's teaching you messages behind the scenes. Many of you may want to go to Yellow Dig and talk about this idea of the hidden curriculum and the things that we've learned through value sets in schools and institutions, right? What is this material culture of a school that we've established non-material culture to teaching us? What are these hidden things that we're learning? What are some examples that you can think of when you're on Yellow Dig? What are some hidden curriculums that you feel maybe school taught you? I mentioned raising your hand and turning an assignment at spelling bee. There's so many more. What are things that have taught you? Waiting in line, is that one? What about queuing? You need to do that your whole life. What about learning how to network? Did you learn that in school? Let's hear some examples on Yellow Dig. So schools also have, as I just mentioned, the hidden curriculum. They can provide you crucial exposure and knowledge about race, social class, disability, sexuality, and gender. Schools also introduce a peer group, right? And essentially what you're looking at is that we have tried, sociology has studied this for generations and years, right? We find school to be the biggest melting pot of all time. In the late 1950s, Coleman decided to break down school into what may seem like a pretty common breakdown: jocks, nerds, leading crowd, and popular kids, essentially looking at how these four categories worked out, and it ended up being pretty interesting, right? Coleman's categories brought to light the social prescriptions, or what is expected of us. Think of a prescription, a medication. When you get a prescription, you go give it to the pharmacist, they give you what you're expecting, right? So the social prescriptions are what we can assume to get, right? Behaviors that are expected of people within their groups. You can prescribe to act this way, right? This showed that certain things were more important to particular groups. Coleman's study essentially looked at it and realized that it doesn't always break down to always the jocks being the popular one. It really bases upon the school's values and norms, right? If getting high grades and you're in a very academically based neighborhood, let's say you're in Washington, or you're at like where I went to high school, which was New Trier, and grades become more pressing than jocks, you might have a switch where the academics are the most popular. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those groups are more important than others. People still may try to play both sides of the fiddle. It's just a reality. So labels can be given to you, associated with, based on your reputation in those groups, right? Like the burnouts, people who are considered not to be able to be a good group, so they get negative outcomes. Many times if you're falling into those labels, it can impact your lifelong projections because people will view you as said burnout, right? So the groups you're a part of impact not only what people associate with you, but also your attitudes towards certain behaviors, actions, groups, and circumstances. This is known as peer pressure. Here's one really good Yellow Dig assignment. Easy. Give me some examples of peer pressure. What are some instances where you've done things you didn't want to do, but you knew if you didn't do them, you would be degraded by your friends? How many of you would say that you would not jump off the bridge? But what if all your friends did? Did you do it? Peer pressure is huge. Conformity is huge, right? Pavlov's theory ties to this. Milgram's theory ties to this. So schools are not only social institutions, but they have the ability to mold, build, and create a perspective. They use this for material and non-material culture, right? We have this construction of how you grew up plays into everything. If you grew up in a religious household, it's most likely that you would have attended religious services with your parents, and they'll probably teach you lessons about whatever they find to be the most pressing thing, right? Many times gender roles can also tie to this. Sunday school will teach you rights and wrongs, good and bad, right? Marx famously said, and this is not the full quote, but religion is the opium to the masses and the voice to the oppressed. The 10 Commandments taught us things we should or shouldn't do, which are very moralistic based principles, right, if you're Christian. And then religion is regarded by the common people as true, but by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. That's a good one right there by Gibbon, right? Religion has been used by many to control. It's not always the case. But the 10 Commandments taught us non-cultural materials, do good things, you know, remember the Sabbath day, you shall not commit adultery, don't steal, things that we can live by, right? Religion has controlled the pen of history many times. We are able to use religion to be able to impact social sanctions upon groups that we don't feel to connect with us, thus social control and fostering behaviors to build a shared perspective. It also creates bonds, which is a good thing, helps people find foundations, which is a good thing. Some people who are really, really feeling disconnected from society tend to fall into religion to find kind of a stability factor and a sense of sin, which helps adhere us to the rules, right? Religion also offers a place to feel connected, community, various institutions as well, religion, right? Government, religion, academics, and more. Manifest and latent functions are a big thing. Manifest is the intended goal, right? So if I'm going to school, my manifest function is to get good grades and pass. My latent function is a positive function that happens by proxy. I went there, but it wasn't my goal. I went to school, got good grades, met the best friend of my life, went to college, met my wife, right? Like these are things that really aspire. So there's an intended and a positive outcome. You're gonna do your goal, you go to school to get a degree. Latent function teaches you how, like something that happened that was positive along the way that you didn't expect. And you see this a lot inside these social institutions. So what's another agent of socialization? Mass media. Oh yeah, it is. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can hurt forever. forever. They suck. I hate that rhyme. But mass media is the distribution of information to a wide audience, right? Think about how many times we can use that false narrative, right? How many times people talk about misinformation. But the media the media we consume helps to paint the picture of the world that we have. If you're watching Game of Thrones or Gladiator, you're seeing cultures and societies you never get to experience, but you're also watching the impacts and influences of mass media socialization. How do you consume your news? Do you guys watch the Philip DeFranco show? Do you guys watch the news, Fox, CNN? What do you watch? How are you building your reality? Do you watch it at all and say that you're not going to? Do you get all your updates on TikTok? Figure out how you're looking at the world, and then you might have an idea of why you're painted this way. It matters. It forms an opinion and builds your perception of reality. So, the internet. Can I interest you in a little bit of everything all of the time? That song is great. If you haven't listened to it, right, like by Bo Burnham, choice. But the internet brings with it the ability to have mass cultural diffusion. So much has been explored and so much has been opened because of it. It's a gift and it's a curse, right? It allows for us to speak unfiltered. You guys are in this class because of the internet. Y'all are in this class. My apologies on guys. All of you students are in this class because of the internet. And you guys aren't none of you all are in my classroom right now. We're on an online course, which means you're seeing the distribution of mass cultural diffusion. You're able to learn about sociology by taking this course. I hope you learn. And it allows you to be able to develop away from this, right? Humans have our original sin that our mind is a gift and it's also a curse, right? We can think of the positive and we can, they say like words can be great or worse yet, they can teach hate. Socialization can do the same. You can have peoples that end up doing terrible things because of peer pressure, right? And it's right here, they said the quote, right? I guess words are an MFer, they can be great, or they can degrade, or even worse, they can teach hate. So the socialization that we occur can also build our perception of reality and also limit our understanding of the world around us. The internet is a tool like any other tool. It can be used for good or it can be wielded for bad. It is an aspect of mass socialization. We see that a lot with disinformation. We have a lot of stuff going on right now in the capital stuff, and how we are all able to view it is great. Being able to call attention to woes like what happened with George Floyd, that's a positive thing that we're able to share and call accountability. But how much have we become desensitized because we see all this mass tragedy at all times? How many of you are really looking into what's happening in Ukraine, or has it already passed to you? Has it already been too long? The internet cycle is so fast. Are you already become desensitized to it? After this pandemic and all of this tragedy we've seen with the epidemic of shootings, are you becoming desensitized to it? Does it have to be a certain level to be sad? Like, these are the things that brings with it mass socialization. And sometimes we also lose the human-centered focus of mechanical solidarity. A little preachy for you, I'm sorry. But social media, what about social media? Well, as Gen Z, you've been raised with a controller in your hand, an iPad, laptop. You've never not had the internet. You will be much better than I will ever be with it in my entire life. Social media has taken the social interactions of day life and placed them into a strange place I like to call the in-between. Goffman has this book that he wrote called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. Feel free to watch this video. It's kind of silly. It's not really that important. But the sociologist Irving Goffman talks about how we do and how we see ourselves in life through a theory he called dramaturgical research, or dramaturgy. Where do we fit in society? Well, we wear masks at all time, and we manage impressions in every situation of who we're supposed to be in this conversation. Am I supposed to be you? Am I supposed to be this? When I'm in this group, who am I? When I talk to my friends, when I talk to my family, that weird culture shock. When I accidentally talk to my mom like I talk to my best friend, doesn't go well, I get in trouble. Boundaries and barriers are learned. Social media helps amplify the deviant label and differ people from not knowing what was wrong. It can be good, it can be bad. It really comes down to how you absorb it and what you're absorbing, because it's a mass diffusion tool to give information. So where does it fit as a socialization agent? Well, how we consume our media is affected by the social traits, class, race, and age, right? And you may think that your algorithm is hard to predict. It's not. It's based on what you search, and what you search is very much tied to class, race, and age. Those are master statuses. Essentially, those are things that define you. Your parents are more likely to watch cable TV than is a millennial or a Gen Z. You are likely to consume more social media through websites than even me, your instructor, due to a socialization of how older I am. I'm an older millennial. I tend to still have some archaic views on how to turn media, right? Yet, as our social innovations, technology, expands the use of streaming services, we become more culturally universal. Look at the idea of Squid Games, right? Amazing, so sociological. If you haven't seen it for this course, I require you watch it. I swear I will put it on a requirement. But that was able to be shared because of the advancements of technological streaming services, right? So since that norm and the values were there, we're able to share it with others. Diffusion of socialization. Consumption of media can also have socioeconomic impact, as lower income families watch more television than do higher economic counterparts. The digital divide, how many families didn't have access or resources to the internet when the pandemic hit, right? You start seeing that. So you start seeing capitalism there, you start seeing conflict theory there. Televisions and media can also encourage the concept of social understanding. You may be able to watch shows, like I mentioned with Barney's, that allow you to have and see things, right? Some people have never been exposed or living in rural areas to LGBTQ communities. They may watch a show like Will and Grace and feel less offended, feel less like maybe their opinions were not accurate. And some of them might be so stuck in their ways that they watch things like Tucker Carlson and hate the world, right? So the media we consume impacts us both socially, psychologically, and ideologically. It's very important how you monitor what you're watching, because it is having an impact whether you think it's not. So let's talk about socialization in a life course. As I mentioned, socialization is forever. We're never done. You're never truly done learning it. This can include routines and choices related to our work life and everything else, the intersections of our lives. You can be in many different roles, and these roles can intersect with one another. Crenshaw is the one who came up with the idea of intersection theory. You should look it up. It's fascinating. Patricia Collins also talks about it a lot. You know, all the different roles that you have. If you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're a student, if you're an employee, right? All of those, it doesn't have to be a person of color, but that's a good example, right? You're going to face various levels of minority statuses that could intersect with each other. My roles as your instructor is instructor, husband, fur father, son, brother, member of society, homeowner, taxpayer, and many more. It's fun to exercise these. Feel free on Yellow Dig to talk about all the roles that we may or may not play inside society, right? What are your roles? What do you play? What are some life roles that you have? One's a student. What else? Your son and daughter? What other roles do you have? So life course, anticipatory socialization, as we mentioned, is the prediction of what we do in the future. As talked about, this understanding is based upon how people anticipate you to move, right? It can be ascribed, it can be achieved. You can be ascribed, meaning it's put on you, but you're expected to go somewhere. And this is very much connected to gender and race as well. Depending on which of these various groups you are within, you can have entirely different expectations of who you will be. If you, like I mentioned before, are from a lower socioeconomic family, maybe you don't have expectations to go to college, and that can be detrimental, Like that seriously can be. If you have someone tell you you're never going to make it, how far is it going to go? What if nothing's expected of you and then you do nothing? Well, there's going to be no loss. What if you're expected to grab the world by the horns and actually you fail? So like whether you're on the rich or the poor side, these expectations of anticipatory socialization can really be hard. It can be hard, right? You can feel really stressed about it and have a lot of anxiety. So when you're in the process of socialization, there's also a thing called resocialization, which Erving Goffman talks about a lot. It's when a person must go through a new socialization process to take on a new identity. This is also done in two different stages, but essentially the first is lose the old. Degradation ceremonies, taking the existing material and non-material culture away. This is honestly done many times through nasty processes. Think of prisons where they take away your identity, refer to you as a number, basically strip you down, actually strip you down naked and like put lice on you and spray you with water, use different means to make you feel belittled until you lose your sense of self and become a part of the new socialization that you're in. Learn the new uniforms, numbers, etc. Resocialization can technically be tied to coercion institutions a lot of time if you think about, and there's good things in resocialization, by the way. A good example of not a negative one is the idea of the military. These places need to resocialize you so that you can become part of the team, have a mechanical solidarity so that you are unified together at all times. And if there's ever a life or death situation, they know that you're not going to falter and think about the family at home. You're going to be in forefront and you're going to be focused. Same thing of why they resocialize prisoners, psychiatric wards and all that, because they need to break the old to establish the new. It can be used for negativity, it can be used for positivity, but essentially they try to remove these articles of personal self, of individuality, and enforce the norms of the institution as a social control through informal and formal methods. So resocialization, resocializing you, taking away all the socialization you had and making you who they want you to be. This comes in the idea coined by Erving Goffman of total institutionalism or total institutions. When a member of society enters a place such as a prison, psychiatric ward, mental health wards, military schools, etc., essentially they're going to use resocialization and degradation ceremonies. Within the book Asylums, if you want a good read, that would be my suggested reads. It's a really good book. He talks about total institutionalism and the participant. He uses what is called research methods, as we talked about, but it's called participation observation. He went in and did actual field work to be able to analyze this. Fun fact, it was Goffman that helped close down the state-run psychiatric wards in many places because they were seen as atrocious and really not good for humans. But some examples of this can be prisoners, nuns, some concepts, shared material culture of individual uniform to help reduce the ability to be able to differentiate, right? Even in Squid Games, they all gave them the same uniform with a number. That's resocialization. They manage this through material and non-material culture. They remove your material and non-material culture, give you a new one. And then you have a shared pain and a shared meaning, and a social hierarchies are established, and then it's easier to maintain your obedience in this process. So Generations, I'm not going to go too far into this because so background on me as a market researcher, I've made a lot of money off of doing generational data. I find it interesting. If you are interested, email me, I'll talk with you about it. There's a lot of fault in saying that everyone in a generation lumped together tends to act the same way. Greatest generation, 1910 through 1927, silent gen, 28 through 45, baby boomers, 46 to 64, generation X, 65 to 80, generation Y, aka millennials, 1981 through 1995, generation Z, post-millennials are born 1996 plus, right? So then you can keep going, alphas next, betas after that. And to say that we all act the same is pretty interesting. Millennial falls into a fun one. The older side of millennials actually did have no internet. Whereas when you look at it like anything else, it just ties to it. I did a lot of personality assessments. This video is pretty interesting because it looks at human cycles and zodiac wheels of time and starts processing people together. But to say everyone acts the same because they're from a generation is very connected to the idea of socialization. It has faults, it has pros, it has cons. If you're interested in talking about it, I'd love to talk with some of y'all about it. It's a good conversation for Yellow Dig. I'll definitely join in. But yeah, essentially because we're socialized in certain patterns, we had different norms, values, and customs that were taught to us. That's why a lot of times boomers seem outdated and millennials are even starting to seem outdated, and Gen X, everyone just forgot about. It's a whole joke. But Gen Z versus boomers, that's why you have such opposing opinions, right? You're being raised by Gen Xers, essentially. It's pretty interesting.
All right.
So final thoughts here. Socialization is a process that we are never truly finished with. You just aren't. You'll be socialized throughout your entire life. Sometimes the things you now know are outdated, need to be politically better. You need to figure out how to stay in the times. And I think it's just better for everyone if we always constantly try to better ourselves, regardless of what generation we're from and how we're socialized. Take in out with the old and in with the new, and also but maintain some of the old. Figure out who you are and draft that based on the social prescription around you. It's a long process. It's a lifelong process. You're going to have scribe statuses. You're going to have roles, statuses, all these different ways that we interact with one another. And it's a beautiful process if you actually think about it. So that's my thoughts there on socialization. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Make sure to let me know if there's anything that you found to be more interesting, less interesting, and yeah, post on Yellow Dig, and I will see you for the next lecture.